Welcome back, citizens! Caroline here. By now you probably understand how events leading up to the American Revolution helped shape the Bill of Rights. It's important to note that while the Bill of Rights was written many years ago, these rights were established to limit the power of the government and preserve individual freedoms. Today we'll examine two amendments that were created in response to the presence of British troops in the colonies. While one seems irrelevant now, the other actively remains at the forefront of discussions in the U.S. Today we'll take a close look at the Second and Third Amendments. Our objectives are to review why they were created and explain the rights and protections guaranteed in each. Before we start, make sure you have your guided notes printed from the PDF. But first, we may need a quick refresher from U.S. history. Most of the protections in the Bill of Rights were inspired by the events that caused the American Revolution. That is certainly true of the Second and Third Amendments. Remember that weapons were gathered by colonists in response to unpopular British laws. Colonial Minutemen and militia were among the primary combatants in the war, and many used their own weapons, especially early in the fighting. James Madison, author of the Bill of Rights, wanted to protect the nation by writing these amendments to add to the Constitution. His intent was to provide the opportunity for citizens and states to maintain a well-trained and disciplined force to check potential tyranny by the federal government, and to bring balance by distributing the power of weaponry among the people, the states, and the federal government. It's worth noting that under the Articles of Confederation, the government was prohibited from keeping an army during peacetime. And even after the Constitution was approved, the U.S. did not have a full-time army during George Washington's presidency. Madison wanted to prevent the government from ever raising an army to oppress its people, so the Second Amendment gives citizens the right to have weapons and training to protect themselves. So when writing the Bill of Rights, Madison promoted a well-regulated militia that included the right to bear arms, which means own weapons. Likewise, Madison believed that never again should Americans have to foot the bill for soldiers to be housed in their communities. Pre-Revolution laws, such as the Quartering Act and the Coercive Acts, which colonists referred to as intolerable, did exactly that. The British government's response to the colonists' stockpiling of weapons, based partly on the forced housing of soldiers, led to the battles of Lexington and Concord, and the shot heard round the world that started the Revolution. Madison and other founding fathers wanted to ensure that one circumstance would remain readily available, while the second would not happen again. It could also be said that along with a civilian-controlled military, they were firmly establishing the right to privacy. Let's take a look at what each amendment actually states. It won't take long, as these two are among the shortest constitutional additions. First up is the Second Amendment, which states, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." Over the course of U.S. history, these 26 words have become some of the most debated in the Constitution. Supreme Court rulings have repeatedly focused on the latter half of the amendment, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This protects the rights of citizens to own guns for various purposes such as hunting and home security. Madison's reference to the militia seems to have been filled today by National Guard and Army Reserve units, who are in many ways modern-day Minutemen. Another current militia is commonly known as State Defense Forces, or SDFs. Almost half of the 50 states maintained their own SDFs as of 2022. Unlike federal organizations, such as the National Guard, SDFs are under the sole jurisdiction of state or territorial governments and cannot be commanded or disbanded by the federal government. Some cite the term militia as a reason for limitations on ownership of weapons, an idea called gun control. Others say the second provides clear rights for citizens to own weapons. Madison's wording has led to debates over the last 2 centuries about whether owning guns can and should be regulated. One side claims that this right is universal and unbreakable, while the other argues that this is a misunderstanding of the Constitution and Madison's intent. As for the courts, their past reasoning is that self-defense is the central component of the amendment. Similar to the First Amendment's limits on freedom of expression, you can say what you want, but you can't always do what you want. The second protects ownership of weapons for activities like defense and hunting. Other actions are not protected, such as using weapons to harm others, or carrying them onto the property of businesses and organizations that limit or prohibit them. In other words, you have the right to own guns, you don't have the right to break laws with them. Whether Madison and the Founding Fathers added the amendment for militias or individual self-defense, or both, remains a topic of debate. Much less debated is the Third Amendment. In fact, it has become almost forgotten in some ways, as so much attention is focused on others, particularly the First and Second Amendments. The entire amendment reads, "No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law." Note that the wording states, "No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house." In this case, house is short for public house, as in a hotel or inn, and the amendment is directed at the cost placed on taxpayers to house British soldiers in such places before the Revolution. Today, such housing of soldiers seems difficult to understand, and would probably be viewed as tyranny and an invasion of privacy. Modern military forces are located across the nation and around the globe. Most states have at least one military base, and the U.S. has several in other countries. Also, there are National Guard and Army Reserve units all across the nation in every state. Additionally, we currently have city, county, and state police agencies. The Founding Fathers were more trusting of the states than the federal government, so law enforcement was delegated primarily to the states to prevent tyranny and oppression by a federal agency. That's part of the reason why police agencies today are intentionally placed in communities in order to maintain peace and serve the people. One of these amendments has moved to the back of Americans' minds, while the other remains at the forefront of discussion for citizens, lawmakers, and judges. As we continue to look at rights and protections found in the 27 amendments, consider the relevance of each in our world today and the world of tomorrow. Until next time, citizens, vote, debate, and participate, and remember to always be clever.
Hey!